This is Knobbox Mark III, and I made it with my friend Simon of the U Shunt channel. Maybe getting on for a year ago now. I can't quite remember when it was, and I think he did brilliantly because I just went down there with a screen and a few knobs, and he designed the casing for it. He laser cut some acrylic on the spot and put all this together, and I think it looks brilliant. But there are a few problems with it. It was always meant to be a prototype. For example, once we'd put all the acrylic together, or he'd put all the acrylic together, there kind of wasn't anywhere to fix the screen in because it wouldn't screw into the, is that acrylic, whatever this plasticky stuff is. So the screen is actually held on by tape, and as is apparent here, it does occasionally fall out. Additionally, if I go underneath, the ESP that's running it, which is just sticking out at the bottom here, is completely at its maximum in terms of usable pins. And that seems to cause problems because there seems to be interference every now and again. Every now and again, the screen will just go white or it'll just go off. Very occasionally, if I press one button, it'll sort of affect the actions of another one. So there's room for improvement. And there are lessons that can be learnt. This is the Mark II version, which I really didn't use for very long, I don't think. But it was much, although it's much bigger and kind of more difficult to house, the wire on the back was a little bit neater because I put the ESP in one of those holster things, which meant I had pin terminals for all the wires, and it worked much more reliably. But obviously, it didn't have the functionality in the screen that the Mark III had. And just back with Mark III for a second, speaking about functionality of the screen, something that I was never able to use again because the ESP was maxed out. Although I did have an idea at one point that I've got a few ESPs that have got more pins. So I was going to kind of have a play with that. But one bit of the functionality that I wasn't able to use was this is a touch screen. But because there were no spare pins on the ESP that I was using, I was never able to use the touchscreen functionality. And to be honest, maybe with this version of the box there wasn't really any need for it either, but it was still something I would have liked to have played with. And then a couple of months ago I got an email from someone called Annie at a company called Elecrow, and the email was along the lines of, we've got some new products, some new screens, would you like to take a look and review one? So I went onto the website and I had a look, and the screens I did find initially impressive. They were they extended to quite a large size, but also they had ESP32s, quite powerful ones, built in, embedded on the board. And obviously this had some interesting advantages to me. No wires to connect the screen for a start, which seemed quite a useful thing. But they had one big drawback, which was if there were any spare pins left on the ESP after all the screen, and I think there's an SD card reader and that kind of thing embedded on the board as well. If there were any spare connectors, pins left on the ESP after all that, they weren't exposed. So although you had this lovely screen and you had the ESP built in, which means you've got all the Wi-Fi and everything built in without having to connect any of it up, I thought, well, how am I going to control it? Because I can't plug any knobs into it because it's got no exposed pins. So I sent an email reply to Annie, said, thank you very much, that's a kind offer, but I don't think it's right for me. So please don't send one. And then I had an idea, and I quickly sent another email to Annie saying, yes, please send one, because I think there's something I can do with it. And I have since had a go at doing that. And the idea I had was, what if I used two ESP, well, an additional ESP to the one that's in the screen? So something like we throttle, which is what I connect to actually control the trains in JMRI. If a device is connected to it and is kind of subscribed and driving a particular loco, if any properties of that loco change, then those changes are communicated to any device that is kind of running that loco. So I started to think, do I need the controls directly connected to this ESP screen? Because any changes to locomotives, any changes to their behavior, their speed, their direction, function buttons, as long as it's connected to eThrottle and has control of that locomotive, it will receive updates through eThrottle. So my initial idea, and spoiler alert, I didn't actually end up going with this in the end, was to have an ESP with a few knobs on it or some kind of control, and have a simultaneous connection to the same train's locomotives that the ESP with the knobs is driving on the screen. And therefore, any changes that are made through the ESP will be reflected on the screen, even though the two aren't connected to each other. And although that was kind of the idea I went with initially, I soon sort of came up against problems with how do I keep them synchronized? How does each one know what the other one is connected to? And because if I, and how do I select locomotives on the ESP that's got no screen? So it became a bit of a minefield, I think. So what I then went for, which is a much simpler approach, I think, is to simply use MQTT to communicate any changes, any knob input on the one ESP to the other one. So the simple approach really is you've got an ESP, and with what I've gone with, I only need two knobs connected to it. So this ESP on the left has two knobs connected to it, and the same as the Knobbox one does. It's sat listening for any knob input, which would be a clockwise click, an anti-clockwise click, or a press of the button. And they're the only three actions that it can have. So what I thought was if as the ESP on the left detects that knob movement, it simply sends an MQTT message saying that knob has moved and in which direction, or whether the button was pressed. And if the ESP under this screen is subscribed to the topics that the ESP on the left is sending to, then it picks up that input as if the knobs were directly connected to it. And so I set about trying to get the code that I'd already written to work on the new screen. My thoughts, my approach on that being that I'd already written stolen the code to display those kind of meters on the screen, and I quite liked it, and I didn't want to have to write steal it again. So what I ideally wanted was to just be able to transfer the code straight from one screen to another. And unfortunately, that wasn't possible for a number of reasons. The main one being this TFT_ESPI library, which is used to populate and place graphics and text on the screen, doesn't support screens as large as this one. The one that I was sent is a 7-inch 800 by 480 pixel screen, whereas the one in the Knobbox was I think was it 4.3 inch 400 by 320 I think screen. And the TFT ESPI library simply doesn't go up to screens of that resolution and size. So I was immediately onto Google, and I found that there's a library called Lovian GFX. If I go and open the most recent one, there's a library called Lovian GFX. Here it is. And very conveniently, that has all of the same functions: fill rectangle, draw circle, write text to screen, all of the functions I was using. However, it does support screens up to this size. It is a different library, and I needed to add this gfxconf.h. I have to say this is more convenient than what I had to do with the old ESP TFT SPI library. So I kind of got this file off the internet, and I haven't really changed any of it other than to define what the screen size is, and it defines somewhere down here. Again, this was all just copy and pasted. I didn't have to write any of this, but it defines right down here at the bottom an object called LCD. And if we go to the main code that I've written, we simply include that gfxconf.h file, and that gives us access to the LCD object. I don't even need to define it. So once we get down here to where the screen starts being set up, which I think is around here somewhere. Looks like I've moved it, so let's get down to the first. There we go. So we we don't even need to instantiate it, define it. We just start using this LCD object. And another issue I had with compilation and well, two issues. I had two main issues. Was I just built a new PC, and in building a new PC, I thought, well, I'll go for it. I'll finally stop using this old 1.8.19 legacy version of the Arduino IDE, and I'll go to the most recent one. So I installed the most recent one, and I've got my code, and I couldn't get it to work. I just couldn't get the screen to come on, and I ended up just down to the most basic code, which was just turn the screen on and make it a certain color, and that wasn't working. In the end, just out of desperation, really, I'd contacted Elecrow, and they sort of replied and they were willing to help. But just out of desperation, I thought, no, I'll go back to the legacy version. I went back to the legacy version, and something I also did, which I think, from memory, I think it was preventing me from even compiling, was the ESP library, if we can find it, ESP32 library, this is it. There is a version called 3.3.0, and with that one installed, the code wouldn't even compile. It came out with an error. So I went back to 3.2.0, and suddenly the code compiled. And when I went back to version 1.8.19, the legacy version, it's still downloadable from Arduino, but it's under a legacy heading. With that installed, suddenly I was getting the code compiled to the screen, and I was getting a response from the screen and stuff being displayed, which felt like a big breakthrough. And at this point, I had really quite... I guess at this point, the issue was I had no idea in my head about what I would do with the extra screen space available to me. I think my initial idea was I'd just make the meters bigger. I'd still have 6 meters, maybe put them in a landscape instead of portrait, but just make them bigger. I had no more ideas than that. And at that point, I had, I guess, quite a bit of luck, in that there was one line of the code that was still making the Arduino. It was making it completely crash, and that was the set rotation line. So because I just copied the code straight from the previous version, the code that I had that I was writing to the new screen was still trying to set the orientation effectively to portrait rather than landscape. And I narrowed down the constant crashing to that line. I commented it out, and then the meters would display on the screen, which again felt like a big breakthrough, because I'd been going at this for about a day already at this point. And I guess it was at this point that I had, I guess, a little bit of luck. And I realise this isn't great for a video, but similarly to that monitor I bought, actually the viewing angle isn't great on this, so I do have to sort of get directly above it to get the full contrast of it, which tends to mean there's a reflection of a camera constantly on it. But the bit of luck I had was really in terms of inspiration. That, like I said, I'm not a visual person really, so I'm not a UI designer. So I didn't really have that bit of inspiration of what to do differently with this screen. So once I'd removed the set rotation, which set it to portrait, I simply uploaded the code to the screen, and I got this. And it should really have been no surprise that I got this, because if I bring in an example of the screen that's in the Knobbox Mark III, it just happens that it is the same height as the width of... Is that the right way around? Anyway, because it's turned. It has the same dimensions. This is a 480 by 320 screen, and this is an 800 by 480 screen. So the height of this one is the same as the width of that one. I think I got it the right way around that time. And being presented with this, I thought actually this could work, because I had in my mind that I was going to keep the 6 simultaneous throttles thing. But what this gave me was it gave me the 6 throttles and left me a lot of space to work with, and they're still perfectly readable. And that fed into the kind of intention I had of using the touchscreen facilities this time, because this time all of the touch connectors, because the ESP is embedded, are all there already. They're all wired in. They're all directly connected to the ESP. So I then started thinking, okay, what about if I've got my 6 throttles there, but I start making them selectable? I can touch them, and whenever I touch one, kind of gets a red box around it to signify that that's the selected throttle, and then maybe I can do something with it here. But also I can significantly reduce the number of knobs I need, because if there is at any time only one of these 6 throttles selected, then if the knob it has input and it is moved, then it stands to reason that the throttle that those input changes are affecting are the one that is installed, selected. And so that little bit of luck that sort of gave me the inspiration really set me off, and from that point I had this idea, and I sort of knew what I was going to do. I went to town on it a bit, because what I realised was, okay, the rest of the screen can be used for touch. I can have buttons, I can have interaction that I couldn't have before, because all I had was those knobs. And whereas I still want to keep the tactile control of the speed and selection being a physical controller, there's a lot I can do with the screen that I don't need to be tactile. And that was certainly the direction I went in. So first of all, this is how the screen looks when you first turn it on, and when it's got itself connected to WeThrottle GMRI. The first thing I added was this track power. Now I've got remote control. I'm in my office, but I've got remote control of the PC that's up there. So that's how it's sort of currently looking. And I thought, well, great. The first thing I want to do is I want track power to be added to this screen, so I can turn it on and off from the same controller. And when you click it, if the track power request is successful, it sort of goes fully green to demonstrate that track power's on. And if I go back up there, you can see now that has turned track power on. And if I just find my mouse pointer, it's all synchronized. So if I was to turn the track power off from here, that will be reflected by this button here. So now kind of I would be at the point, if this was up there and actually in use yet, where I want to control trains. So first thing I do, all of these throttles are now selectable. If I hit my finger on one of them, a little red box surrounds it to tell me that's the one that's currently selected and will be affected by any relevant input. So just for neatness, let's go at the top. They're selectable and unselectable as well. Let's go select that top one. And this is the point where I would need a couple of knobs. I'd have my selector knob here, and as I turned it, I would be able to select a loco, and I'd have my speed knob down here. But I haven't built that yet. But because the communication between the two would be done over MQTT, I can simulate it by using MQTT Explorer. So the first topic that I created, which the communication would use, is one called selector movement, which kind of explains itself. And there are only 3 possible payloads in there. There is C for a move clockwise, AC for a move anti-clockwise, and SEL meaning select, which would be when the knob is pressed. So if I send over MQTT this simple 1-letter payload on that topic, and come down here and watch the reaction, we'll see that what it's doing is as sort of anticipated. It's letting me go through and select a loco from the roster. So because that class 37BR is visible already the throttle is up there on the screen. You can see just out of anticipation, it has two functions selected already, light and F3 light, which is F0. So I'm now going to come back over here and I'm going to change the message that it's sending from C to SEL, which means select. So I go and get my pointer over that publish, and this is the effect that sending that message will have on the screen. We get a nice big representation of the throttle that we're actually using. There's a release button there, which I'll come to later, but any function buttons that were already selected in JMRI are reflected as being selected on this function button list. And the function buttons themselves are new. I didn't have anything like that in the Knobbox Mark III, but it did get frustrating from time to time, because although I don't use them much, because I almost completely don't use sound, it would have been convenient to be able to turn lights on and off, which is the main thing I use functions for. And previously with Knobbox Mark III, I actually had to get a throttle open, come up here, get the throttle open and hit the light button there. So I think it's a step forward for me that functions are available here. And it's a simple case of, if I want to turn them on, let's go for this F2. Now, that's an interesting way. Let's turn F1 on, and you can see if I put F1 on, it's reflected there. Now F2 must be, I mean, it probably doesn't work with this train, but F2 must be momentary. There's two types of functions. There's on-off functions like lights, so I can turn lights off and I can turn them on. But F2 is a momentary one. That would be like a whistle, I think, is the example in the Wii Throttle documentation, whereby it's only on for as long as I hold it. But the screen supports holding, so if I hold my finger on F2, you can see underneath there it's stayed on, and F2 is on there. But as soon as I let go, it's switched off again, and again reflected up there by being switched off. And so we've got our train loco selected, we've got its lights turned on and any functions we want to set. We probably now want to move it. And again, this is where there'd be a second knob down here, which would be representative of a speed movement knob, but I don't have one of them yet, so we're going straight back to MQTT with a slightly different topic, this time layout / speed movement, but exactly the same payloads: C for clockwise, AC for anti-clockwise, and SEL for select. In the case of the speed knob, pressing it down would stop the train, so we do still need to send those messages. And if I start pressing publish and sending those messages, what we'll see is with each clockwise message we send, both the main meter and the mini meter at the top change to represent the speed that the thing is running at. And just out of interest as well, the slider on JMRI, which is a percentage representation of the speed rather than a speed step, which means the value is always slightly different, because down here we're looking at speed steps out of, I think it's 126. But anyway, that's our train moving. Because once we've got our train moving, we may well want to add a second throttle. So in order to do that, I would come down here and select an empty one, or whichever one I wanted to replace. At any point, if I need to, I can go straight back to this one and get the sort of the full display on the screen. But for now, we're going to put a second locomotive to use, and I just need to do a little bit of copy and paste, because what I need to do coming over to the MQTT messenger is I need to get the selector topic back on, and I've got my C there. So as I start publishing with this second throttle selected, I start getting a choice of which locomotive I want to use. So this time we'll go for a class 40. And what of course I need to do now is change my C. This, once I've actually got the knobs, obviously this won't be quite as cumbersome as it is now, but this is useful for testing. So I'm going to send my select over. I can see that the second throttle is selected. So what should happen if I send that selector is I can now see the class 40. And just to be a little bit lazy so that I'm not having to send all of those messages again, if I come back up here and find the roster, which is there, go and get the class 40 BR, there it is, and a throttle up. If I increase the speed here to say 50%, that will be immediately reflected on the screen. So I've now got two locos running, and I can switch between the two as well. And again, if the class 40 had lights, I could turn them on, and again that would be reflected over there. So really, that's all of the usage of the screen. The couple of other buttons I've got is if anything disastrous is happening, I can click stop all trains and they will immediately have an emergency stop applied to them. That will only work for the locomotives that are controlled or monitored on this screen. So if I have any other throttles that are running trains separately, it won't stop them, but it will stop all of the trains that are controlled by this. And last of all, if I've pulled my class 40 into the yard and I'm finished playing with it and I want to replace it, or at least I don't want to accidentally drive it anywhere, I can hit this release button and that unassigns it from the throttle. So I think now it's time to look at tactile control again and actually getting some physical control of this thing. It turns out, it appears, that I am suffering from a severe knob shortage. I don't have any to spare, so I think I'm going to have to revert right back to Knobbox Mark 1, which has been pretty much pilfered, had its ESP nicked, but it does have at least a few knobs in it. So this is going to be the tactile control for the screen, I think. Okay, I was not expecting this. I've spent the last few hours with what I could only describe as severe knob problems. I'm a veteran of 3 knob boxes. I was not expecting this, but when I connected them up to the ESP, it simply didn't work. It sort of worked a little bit. If I turned it clockwise a few clicks, I would get clockwise up, but then it would just go randomly stupid. I'd get 3 anti-clockwise for 1 clockwise, and it was just bonkers. And so, I mean, I tried different knobs, I tried different ESPs, and the behavior was the same with all of them, which really surprised me and frustrated me, and for a while I didn't know what to do. The only conclusion I come to is the only thing I couldn't try was one of the ESPs that's actually upstairs being used as a knob box. The original batch of ESPs I bought, I've run out of, and I've since bought different models. I think these are S3s, and I think they have faster clocks. And the only thing I can think of is because they're running faster, they're reading more values from the knob, and because the knob's effectively an analog device, they're getting the little bit of flapping between 0 and 1 when the knob is moved. And they're picking that up. So in the end, I wrote some software debounce into the code that reads the values. Unbelievably, 1 millisecond of debounce appears to have fixed it. Yeah. Well, here we are connected up and probably about the limit of my physical design capabilities. There's another, in fact it's dangling down there, there's an ESP underneath this knob box now, and it's listening on these 2 knobs, and whatever movement it detects it sends to MQTT, which the box is subscribed to. So the idea would be now I can select which throttle I want to assign a loco on. I can turn the assign select knob, knock it on the head when I found the loco that I want, and then adjust the speed with this knob. There's perhaps a little bit of noticeable lag between me turning the the speed knob and it appearing on there, which probably is unsurprising considering it's gone through MQTT. But really, I'm not watching the screen when I turn the knob, I'm watching the loco. So as long as the screen within half a second reflects what speed the loco's going at, I just don't think it's that much of a problem. It's not a massive lag. It's, yeah, maybe half a second. I think I'll try it upstairs anyway, and I'll see what I think of it. And the emergency stop is fast enough, so I think it's time to take it upstairs. At this point then, I brought it all upstairs, and at this point a couple of frustrating issues crept in. First of all, when I got it up here, the screen was really struggling, or the ESP that's embedded in the screen was really struggling to get onto the Wi-Fi network, and it kept losing its MQTT connection. The assumption I came to with that is actually when it had that plastic casing on, which which Elecrow sent with it, it was covering the ESP32 antenna, which is just underneath there. So I took the case off and the connection seems to be better. When I took the case off and got it all started up again, it joined the Wi-Fi network fine, but the screen became completely unresponsive. Didn't matter what I did, didn't matter what sketch I used, just basic test sketches, the screen no longer responded to touch. And I think what happened is, again, coming underneath, this big ribbon here is the touch connector, probably amongst other things, looking at the number of connectors that were on it. And it hadn't come out, but it had come loose. And what I needed to do was that black, I'm sort of holding the camera and the screen here, so I can't point at it, but that black clip as it is that's along the edge of the connector, I just had to click that up and then push the ribbon in a little further, and that sorted it out, and then clip it back down again, so it looked like it was just a loose connection. Anyway, that's sorted now, and I'm finally ready to test. I'm actually putting the screen a little bit lopsided as well when it's resting on here, just so that the antenna again isn't covered when it's settled on its makeshift stand. I have some willing volunteers on the top deck then that I'm going to try it with. So let's go with this this newish to me Swallow Class 43. So I'd start off just by choosing the did I touch that? Let's get a decent angle on it. There we go. Touching the throttle that I want to use, and then moving the selector knob until I can find, there it was, the loco that I want. Just press the selector knob down, and that gets me to this point. I'm going to switch hands quickly, and what I'd really like to do is get its lights on, so I press F0 there, and I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but it now has lights on. And then it's time to start driving, so go for the speed knob. Let's hope it doesn't stall. Off it goes. I'd now like to get what has so far been empty circles on the screen working, which are cab signals when that bit of that app I was just pointing at was is running and working. So we now have cab signals for the loco as it runs around, and somewhat predictably everything is green for it at the moment because it's just running around, the only train running on the layout, and there's nothing impeding it. There's a little class 101 sat awaiting instructions on the next line in, so I'm going to come over here. Again, I'm going to select the throttle that I want to put it on. I'm going to have a little look around. I think that's the one. So again, just press this down to select it, and I should be able to just turn in the speed knob there, get that one moving too. And if I go and have a look, yeah, that's making its way along. And just to fill the top deck with moving trains, I'm going to get this this little rattler from the Bay platform moving as well. At the minute, this Class 43, the blue-grey one, is a new one, and it is by no means serviceable yet. I've got a lot of work to do on that one, which is probably going to be the subject of another video. But I should be able to get the 154 moving. So back over here, I'm going to have to bring it out of the platform, so do some clicking here. And then down here, let's go for this one and go find it. Did I click that? I didn't click that. There we go. That's the one. Select that one. And I want to just get it moving slowly because I want it out of that siding but no further. So there I can see it's out of that siding now, so I'm going to come back over here and just press this to stop it, then press it once more to change the direction. I can see that's gone to reverse now, and then I just want to set these points so that it's going straight on. Check over here that there's nothing horrible happening, and get that oh, wrong button. Right, I've turned the wrong knob now. I've put a 7-second timeout in case I do that. So what should happen here after about 7 seconds, there you go, is it'll revert back and I can use the right knob, which is this one. So that should get the 154 moving towards me. Let's have a look. Oh, a little bit on the fast side, but here it comes. I can just turn behind me and slow that down a little. It's more like it. I haven't seen the 101 for a while. I don't know if that's stalled. Let's have a look over here. Nope, still moving. There we are. And I mean that's it working really. Oh, let's try making life difficult for it. Let's put something on the line that will consume a bit of current. This 25 will do the job as the 154 still quite a way away, I think. So let's get this roughly. There we go. So now I should be getting caution. I don't know if that's picking up the colour difference, but the let's slow it down a bit, and there we've got red because it's a long block, but the 154 has now entered the final block before the issue, and the issue is obviously occupancy of the next block. So what I can do, if I can get it all in the same shot, just nip that off the track, and in a second or two, there we go, we've gone green again with the cab signals, and I didn't bother stopping it because I knew I was going to whip the 25 off in time. But now the 25 can go, 154 can go safely past. And so that's Knobbox Mark IV. I've sort of hinted, I think, a couple of times, is I'm not sure whether I can accommodate it. I'm not entirely sure where I've got anywhere. If I step back a bit, it's also crowded and, for want of a better word, messy. I don't think I've got anywhere to mount that screen. There's no real space up there. So the poor old Knobbox Mark III might be making a quick recovery, although having edited the earlier parts of this video already, it will be getting a bit of a dust before it comes back. However, I think what was in my mind when I was going through creating this was Simon at U-Shunt, because he made a video quite a while ago of him constructing a command station, and there's absolute perfect space for what would be Knobbox Mark IV on his layout. So I think that's where this is going to end up going. In fact, I've bought a second screen as well, just to be on the safe side. But now I've taken the plastic cover off, obviously these screw holes, it'll go in, and I'll try and put an image of the command station he's built that I'm sort of imagining, or well, picturing. But the screen would screw in nicely, maybe towards the top of the command station, and then you find a little space for a couple of knobs underneath, and I think that would work really well for him, even if it doesn't work particularly well for me. And I guess when I'm finished, I can't be bothered to put, route everything into the yard, so it would just be a case of stopping the trains. I can either click that emergency stop button, which I don't particularly want to do, so one by one I can just stop these trains where they are and release them. I've realised there's a little bit of a bug in the software left, that it's not when locos are released, the cab signal is not being set back to an empty circle, so that's something I need to look at. But let's get the 101 stopped as well. Nice timing actually. We will stop it as it comes around here. There we go, and we can release that one, and the swallow's made a perfect visit as well, so just as that's going around the corner, so able to stop that too. And last thing to do, of course, is to turn off the track power.